Hi all, thanks for watching the tracking series. We hope that in the tracking series that you've been able to get a true idea of how conservation operations run in Africa, tracking suspects and poachers in a real life situation. My name is Colin Patrick. I'm a tactical tracking instructor and conduct tactical tracking operations in Africa. This is Tristan Patrick. Tristan Patrick assists with the tactical tracking and also with the training and operations with regards to tracking with K9 in tactical tracking operations. So in this series, what you guys have seen is you've seen various forms of tactical tracking. And the tactical tracking aspect, and historically we've always tracked as human beings with our eyes, so we've tracked visually. And of late, probably in the last 10 to 15 years, what has happened is through basically demand and through the necessity where your poachers have advanced their maneuvers and their techniques on how they anti-track, how they deceive and hide their tracks, we've had to start bringing in other methods of coping with that. And one of those methods that we use is using K9, using dogs to actually assist us in the tactical follow-up operation. Now remember, in a tactical follow-up operation, it's always a team. The visual aspect of tracking done by the human being is still important and it still has to be there. All we've done is we've complemented with the dog's nose, because the dog uses a scent to track, and the ability to have a dog in your tracking team that can use its sense of smell, which is unbelievable, to help us locate and track suspects further enhances our abilities while we're conducting these operations. So I've been doing tactical tracking from a reserve management point of view in various parts of Africa, basically since 1993. And about 15 years ago, I was asked to be involved in the development and the training of rangers with regards to tactical tracking techniques. And then later we realized that we need to advance it and utilize K9 into that. So that's what we're doing at the moment. And most of what we do is what we call development work. We try and stay ahead of the curve. So we have to keep our eyes and ears on the ground. We have to realize what the current requirements are with regards to rangers and what the capabilities rangers have to have with regards to tracking. And then we've got to see where we want to be in the future, where we want to be in 5 years' time. And what we then do is we then train accordingly. One example of it is that we started and we realized that rangers have to have the ability to work at nighttime. So we had to develop that ability of a ranger to be able to be capable at operating under low light conditions. And that was quite an important jump with regards to working with the rangers. There's a major safety aspect, there's a lot of training that's needed, but we've obviously developed that to the situation that a ranger nowadays can actually quite comfortably work at nighttime. So traditionally, when we are tracking suspects in conservation-related circumstances, what we would normally end up doing is you would normally have a K9 that is on leash, or what we call online. That leash is approximately, can be anything between 4 and 10 meters long, and that leash is attached to the handler, or the handler is holding the leash. The K9 then follows the scent. The handler and the team follow that K9 along the trail. We realized that in our conditions in conservation, we had to make a number of adaptations with regards to that. And one of the main focus points that we look at in these tactical follow-up operations is what we call momentum. So we've got a saying, and we say time equals distance. And the more time we can save and the more momentum we can have, and remember, it's not speed, it's momentum, then the more effective we can be. So again, about 5 years ago, I started playing with an idea, and we've now been able to develop it to a product that is now usable in the conservation realm, and that's a product what we call RTD, or independent tracking dogs. So there, what we have is the K9 is actually operating off lead. There's a number of aspects that are required with regards to the training of the K9. It's very extensive, but inherently what the K9 does is it's tracking independently of its handler, and more importantly, the handler has a limited effect that it can have on the K9, which means that the K9 tracks in a far natural and generally more accurate way. So there's advantages with regards to that, and that's something I think pretty much, it's almost revolutionized the conservation realm, because it's added a lot of momentum and other aspects with regards to safety and effectiveness that we are seeing advantages now in the conservation realm. Tristan does most of the training with regards to that, and he can explain to us what the advantages of the independent tracking style is.
Okay, so there are quite a few advantages to the ITD tracking dogs. We are able to work with the dog a lot more comfortably. The dog is allowed to go at its own speed, at its own momentum. It is able to move where it wants to. For example, with an on-leash dog or online tracking dog, it is connected with the handler on a leash. So the dog can only go where the handler is able to go. So it limits the dog's ability to go where the scent is. Because of the scent not being in the open where it is easy for us humans to walk, it's usually in the thicker brush where we have to go low, where it's difficult for us to move comfortably. That allows the dog to be able to go freely wherever it wants, whether it's in the thick bush, open bush, anything like that. All we have to do is we have to stay in contact with the dogs. We follow in the general area. The ITD tracking dogs, independent tracking dogs, are able to move freely. Obviously, with the dogs being off leash, control is a big issue. From a young dog, we have to do a lot of training in regards to that. Control with being able to control the dog via command, or training habits in that the dog acts a certain way in certain situations. We are not always going to be there with the dog, so we need the dog to be able to act accordingly. For example, most of the areas we work in is big game areas where you have lion, leopard, elephant, buffalo, all the big animals, and a lot of small animals to distract the dogs. Now, a lot of dogs, if you haven't trained it, their prey drive will want to take over, and they will want to chase, or they will get distracted by it. And every time a dog's distracted, it's losing focus and losing drive. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that in training, we train the dogs to not get distracted by animals, be able to control itself when running into a lion or leopard. As you can imagine, it's quite a scary thing for a dog to run into a lion that's 10, 20 times its size. So we need to train the dog to be able to act and think in that situation. Usually with something like that, we would want the dog to come back to the handler, and we teach the dog that the handler is the safe spot. The handler is the place where you can't get hurt. If the dog is close with us, if it is in contact with us, we are able to assist it. We are able to be extra security for it. The dog alerts us to things, but we are the security for it. So we need to make sure all that training is in place because of the dog not being on leash. So with the ITD dogs, once they've completed their training, how they are supposed to work is they will be tracking off leash, and they are taught to, after a certain amount of time, come and make contact with the handlers again. They are trained to either just turn back once they have visual of us. They'll then go back onto track and carry on, or they'll come back to the handler, walk with the handler to the last track, and then complete the track. We do not try and force the dog into a certain way of tracking. We give them the guidelines, and whichever way they want to work within those is 100% for us. Usually if we don't force a dog to do something like that, the dog works a lot better and has a lot more drive to want to do it. With these dogs, we need to be able to do on-leash tracking or online tracking as well. For instances where there's lots of vehicles driving, where it's not safe for the canine, where we're in a village where there's lots of people, lots of things going on, where we need to have complete control over the dog for their safety and for others. We need to train them to be able to be an online dog as well.
So the concept that we've developed in ITD or independent tracking is the following. What you have is you have your tracking team that is still a tactical tracking team, and you have your canine that is generally operating slightly ahead of that tactical tracking team. What that canine is taught to do under extensive training is to track freely, independently, but still move back, make contact with the tracking team, and then move ahead. What you invariably then have happening is the canine creates a safety buffer for the tracking team, and the canine makes contact with the suspects before the suspects hear or see the tracking team approaching.
So with the ITD dogs, we generally have certain types of dogs we use for it. We need calmer dogs that are able to think in situations that get a little bit intense. Because they are off leash, they need to be able to control themselves as well. So if you have a too hyped up dog, it generally doesn't work. The breeds we usually like to use is the shepherds, for example, a Dutch Shepherd or Belgian Malinois. You can use other breeds, but this breed is the one that we use because of its ability to do whatever. We do detection searches, searches for a firearm or for rhino horn or pangolin, anything like that, while the dog is used for tracking, for aggression work, for controlled aggression. So we have a very all-rounded dog, so that you don't have a dog that does one specific thing and one specific skill, and you don't end up with 10 dogs for each scenario. So we have a dog that if we take it, we are able to tackle anything that we need to.
So what we've had a look at when in the development of these dogs that we use then for conservation, in particularly the ITD dogs, is we take a dog from a young age, and the first thing we actually work with is with the socializing of the dog. Very important that our dogs are able to work under various conditions. So for the first 5 or 6 months of a dog's life, it actually spends time in a family. It spends time lying on couches just like a normal dog, and it bonds with its handler and it becomes a normal dog. But we at the same time, what we do is we expose it to as many different stimuluses as possible. The dogs go into the towns with us, they travel in the vehicles with us, they go playing with the children and various different people so that they become very sociable. That means our dogs are generally not aggressive when it comes to working in various situations. They are actually adaptable and can work in all situations. Once that step happens, after about 6 months, we then start focus on what we call the focused training. So if a dog's going to be focused mainly on tracking, we start then developing the tracking aspect of it. Once that tracking aspect is developed, then we look at the further development or the further specializing of the dog. That could go into the detection, generally detection with regards to either illegal ammunition, firearms, ivory, rhino horn, pangolin scales, which is a big problem. And then after that, if necessary and if it's a requirement, we add a portion of aggression to it. And you heard what Tristan said. He said it's controlled aggression. We want a dog that is very effective what it does, but has the ability to actually be aggressive under a controlled manner if it needs to be. And in most cases, we actually use it in what we call a suppression role. That means the dog plays an intimidation role and not actually an aggression role. And we achieve most of what we need to do just by that intimidation aspect. The true problem with regards to training is not necessarily the dog. It's more the handler that needs to be trained, and that's the difficult thing. I'm going to try and demonstrate that. I'll try and do a couple of tricks. So if you observe Tristan, if I tell Tristan to sit, you'll see he doesn't really listen. So generally it's the handler that's the problem. It's the dogs are the easy ones. So if you look at 𝗙𝗪, this is 𝗙𝗪, this is my personal dog. I'm going to talk to her a bit. 𝗙𝗪, come. 𝗙𝗪, sit. You see how that worked? Whereas Tristan, he's still standing, he hasn't even sat yet. So these guys like this, that's particularly why we choose these breeds, highly intelligent. Normally 1 or 2 times, once they've realized what they need to do, well then they'll do it. Obviously, like I said, we have to have an aspect of these dogs' ability to work in conservation thing. So if I need a dog, and I'm going to just demonstrate, I'll move in this slight area, I want you to focus on the dog. And you're going to see, because this is my dog, it gets to the point where you subconsciously can communicate with the dog. So watch, when I move, you'll see the dog actually watches me. Can you see what she did there? If I had to keep on moving, the dog will actually get up and follow me. So what's happening is, this dog eventually, because it spends so much time with us, it does its actions subconsciously. But if necessary, I can do things like this. 𝗙𝗪, come. 𝗙𝗪, come. 𝗙𝗪, sit. 𝗙𝗪, down. So it's general things like any dog can train. All we do is we add it into an aspect of tacticalness. If I need to get that dog into cover, I just do this. 𝗙𝗪, enter. 𝗙𝗪, sit. 𝗙𝗪, down. And now you can see the dog is now literally in that, and there's control there. Remember what you heard, we operate in areas where there's potentially dangerous animals. That dog knows that I'm the safety, it'll move into me, now it's safe and I can secure the dog, as the example. Yeah. So some of the training, what the dogs do is we like to think that we're the trainers and we can achieve a lot. But more than often, once these dogs gain experience and what we call become operationally fit, they'll do a lot of the things themselves that they've just learned themselves. So the move that I'll show you now is what I call Coda's SEAL Team 6 move. It's actually a move that I didn't train it. It actually happened just by fun and out of coincidence. But what we do is we reuse it now in reality. So I'll give you the scenario. The scenario is we are busy on tracks, there's long grass, a lot of bush around, and the next thing a suspect jumps up, but he's about 200 meters in front of us. The dog is on the ground, so the dog doesn't see the person jumping up 200 meters away. I've now got to indicate to the dog where that person is so that that dog can react to it. So I'm going to demonstrate that to you guys. So I can bring Coda. Yeah, Coda, come. Coda, come. Coda, sit. So if you have a look at this, on that command, what the dog will then do is jump onto my shoulder and then point. And if somebody then moves in behind, the dog then focuses on that and I point the dog. But like I said, this started as a game. Okay, Coda, come. And you can see what she then watches. You see how she's checking. And then what will happen is I release the dog and the dog goes after the suspect. Good dog. But she loves it. Very good. This method of tracking, the independent tracking dogs method, is not a method used or that could be used for every reserve. It's a highly specialized method, and what we do is we'll analyze what the requirements of the various organizations or national parks or reserves where it's needed, and then we allocate it accordingly. The important thing to remember is this dog inherently is still a leash dog or a line tracking dog and can be used accordingly. So we have a look at that, but we have seen that in the industry it's becoming more and more usable, and I foresee that in the near future there's going to be a move to this style of canine operation in the conservation world where it's your partner. It's not a dog that is kennel based and now is working and then kennel based. It's actually becoming a partner and becoming part of that team, literally.